Wow. What a conversation this has been.
Nobody from people that I know are in hospice because they chose to be in hospice. Hospice chose them.
This is a very intense conversation. But at any rate, the experience of being with a patient as they are getting very close to end of life is an extremely unique and deep and intense experience.
The hospice doesn't only mean death, it means life as well.
I would say that that loved one knows a whole lot more about what's going on than you think they do.
How to be best friend with your loved one.
This is quite an incredible experience. I'll never forget it.
Well, I wanted to thank you guys for making this happen. Sarah, Jeffrey, Angelica, for putting this together. It's been a long-time dream of mine to have a podcast and to talk about hospice and these sort of perceived as difficult topics on air. And I hope that this will bring many people, or at least some people, more deeper knowledge and understanding. And it's the best to start here today with you, Jeffrey, as a hospice volunteer, because if you look at the history of hospice, it has started completely as a volunteer movement. Mm-hmm. It became a Medicare benefit later on, and as I'm staying in hospice, I see much of progression going into for-profit and businesses and the like. So I'm really happy that the start of podcast, and hopefully we'll have many series to continue, but happens with a hospice volunteer, and we get to tell people what that's like. So thank you so much. A little bit about myself. I'm a nurse by profession. I started my career as a caregiver, went to certified nursing assistant, worked there throughout nursing school. I became a nurse director, and now I'm a founder and owner of Life Choice Hospice. That's a little bit of my background. If you guys want to introduce yourself.
Sure. So I started working with Alex about 9 years ago when I moved here, and I'm a clinical social worker by trade. I've done a lot of different projects and things, but this is certainly a first for me. And I really liked what Alex was saying about it. I really didn't even realize this when we were planning this, but to start really this series, hopefully, with a volunteer is really, really fitting. And when we had this idea, one of my first thoughts was, you are even more of an interesting person than I knew, just talking a little bit about your history and kind of what brought you here. So I want to thank you for joining us today.
I don't want to interrupt, but I know Jeffrey initially said, I don't know about going on here, or microphones, cameras, and everything else. But that day, I think, was just before Christmas when you stopped by the office, and that's the first time I met you.
Yes.
I thought this was a perfect fit, and thank you so much for agreeing to this. But yeah, I'm touched and inspired by your stories, and I know you're humble, and it seems like it's just a little story there, but it brings a lot of inspiration. So thank you again.
No, thank you. Yeah, it was a bit daunting, knowing that I was going to be part of this experience. But I'm grateful to be here, and I really appreciate the company and the tone that you're setting, for this conversation. I really do. My name is Jeffrey. My career was in the hospitality industry, and so for most of my adult life, that was what I did. My father was an Army career man, and my family settled in the Chicago suburbs when I was in high school, and that was where I began my hospitality career, also with Marriott Hotels and Resorts in Lincolnshire. But that career took me all over the place, all over the planet, really, and I'll always be grateful to Mr. Marriott for giving me the opportunity to have an experience like that. But as my career began to kind of wind down, I guess, for lack of a better way of putting it, we were living in Williamsburg, Virginia at the time, and I'm not sure exactly what it was, what the intuitive nudge was that encouraged me to express interest in doing some volunteer work for a hospice organization there, but I did. That was where it began, and that was about 9 years ago. And so I spent the first few years of my hospice work in Williamsburg. Then when we relocated and moved back here.
Was that the first, did you try volunteering in other places, or your volunteering at hospice was the first volunteering you've done?
That was the first volunteer experience I'd ever had.
Okay.
And it's actually a good question because, how or why I ended up going to hospice work, I'm not really sure, but I have a thought on it. My mother-in-law was a registered nurse in Highland Park Hospital and a very dear person. And somewhere along the line, early on, when in our relationship, she said to me one day, "You should consider doing hospice work sometime," because she also did hospice work. But she said, I think that's something that you would, be good at. I think it would be meaningful for you. And I said, but I didn't give it a whole lot more thought. And on
the seed was planted.
Perfectly expressed.
Yeah,
it was.
And every story that I hear really about hospice, there's something, I don't want to say magical or spiritual about it, whatever, that means to you. But nobody from people that I know are in hospice because they chose to be in hospice. Hospice chose them. It kind of somehow happens where, this one seed is planted and then, we wake up one morning and you say, I was driving by and I saw this sign, another, sign gets there, and that's how you end up. But it was really interesting. I've heard people volunteering in the different settings and really want to try something a little bit deeper, something more meaningful, and then they go into hospice or have a loved one in hospice or pass away on hospice.
Some sort of experience,
right? And then they say, "Wow, this really opened up. I didn't know what it was," and then volunteer. So this is a first, and yeah.
You expressed it perfectly. That is exactly what happened. It really is, and your passion for what you do shows. It really does, And I think that's an essential connection with the work that we do. You either are really drawn to it or not, And whatever that intuitive nudge was that I received when I was in Williamsburg, now it's time to reach out and let's explore this thing. I just did it. I didn't give it a whole lot more thought. It was the first volunteer thing I'd ever done in my life. And it is without a doubt the most meaningful experience I have had in my life as an adult. And I mean that sincerely. I've had incredible experiences and I'm grateful for the life that I've had and, that my career work and so on. And I'm a very blessed and very lucky person, no question. But the time that I have spent doing hospice work, and I don't even think of it as work. It's just what we do. But the time I spent with hospice patients and is the most meaningful thing that I do with my time on both a physical level as well as you commented on, a spiritual level actually too.
What was your understanding of hospice when you decided? So your family nurse said you should do hospice, and she probably had an understanding of hospice and chose you for a reason. She saw a few things, but so then you're thinking, okay, let me Google hospice, let me research hospice. What was your understanding of hospice before you went into the first day of volunteering?
With the inpatient unit?
Just generally, because
No, it's a good question. I don't know if I really had a concept of hospice. I knew what it was, but I had not really had any experience with it. For some reason, as I got older in my adult years, I kind of confronted my fear of death, and it was something that I had carried with me from a childhood. I had a couple of family deaths that were kind of traumatic for me at the time, but for some reason, I somehow felt that this was a way for me to address that, or to learn more about it, or whatever the right way of putting it is. But at any rate, somehow that all connected back together. I'm not saying this well.
The interest was stronger than the fear.
Oh yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Yes, it was. I was just deeply interested in it. And
I think that that piece in itself is very different from, I think, what maybe an average person would, to really be aware of that, to recognize that, this is where I'm at. I want to push past maybe some of that, maybe initial discomfort, and I want to learn more. I want to experience that.
Yes, because it was such a positive nudge that I was receiving. It wasn't driven by fear or terror or darkness or anything like that. It wasn't. There was an opportunity for me to learn something here, to face and confront and grow and learn. Somehow all those things just kind of pulled together, and I so totally agree with you that somehow or other the carrot was dangled, the nudge was given, the intuitive sense that this is the right place in the right direction, to take, and I followed it, and it has proven to be beyond anything I had ever really even imagined or expected. It's been a wondrous experience.
So you found a hospice agency in Virginia, and I think you shared with us earlier that there was a GIP, a general inpatient unit, which again, maybe to some that are listening, there is different levels of care. And in GIP, general inpatient is the highest, the more acute level of care, basically a hospital-like setting.
Yes.
It's when people need pumps, and it's when everything else fails. Or sometimes I see that maybe the nurses that are providing care in a home setting are not experienced enough to keep the patient in a home setting, and they require a higher need. So for me, always, as I do more on a home care side, and 98% of Americans want to stay at home for their last chapter of life. I feel almost sometimes that it's a failure of us if we allow patient to be in a hospital and treat them there. But there are plenty of diseases and a lot of many different cancers that were incredibly difficult to deal with in a home setting, to make sure that the patient is comfortable, and that do end up going into GIP setting. So this, from my understanding, was your first experience. You volunteered at that unit, at the GIP setting.
Yes, you're exactly correct. It was a 4-room, it was actually a home that was built to accommodate 4 hospice patients in a very home-like bedroom setting. So the setting itself was very comforting and peaceful. And the people that I attended were very close to end of life. I mean, it was a matter of a couple of days, 2 or 3, 4 days, often. But it was a very, very deep, meaningful time spent with these people, because we had to go through a certain amount of training in order to be prepared, to understand and handle, what it is that awaited. But at any rate, the experience of being with a patient as they are getting very close to end of life is an extremely unique and deep and intense experience. And that was the first incredible awakening that I had as I began, to do it more and more often. And I spent time at Hospice House every week. But to be there with that person at that point in their life, to be able to provide a level of comfort and companionship, and to know that they, in a very real way, can sense that we're there, But to be able to sit bedside with a person, and to share a gentle touch with that person, as they're lying there in bed quietly, and they're wandering. They are off in a as they prepare for that that change in life, and to be part of that experience in those quiet times. I found myself kind of sharing in the dimension that person was in, and it was more almost like being a watcher, like with the capital W. You're there with that gentle touch with that person at this point, in their life, and it brings that person comfort. And the comfort that it brought to the family members was even more profound, because they could step away from their loved one long enough, knowing that their loved one was under the care of a person who genuinely, sincerely, wholeheartedly is part of the experience. And that gave them a feeling of peace and comfort beyond anything else that they'd experienced in a hospital environment,
Right.
I don't know if that...
No, that's a very good explanation. I have a question, and I'm not sure if that's true or not. I've repeated it to a few of my patients in the past, and some said that it is. The dying itself, that experience is very unique to people, but it's also very, I'm losing the words, it's almost like giving a birth of a child, right? You don't want many people that are outsiders in a room. Yeah, it's sacred, and it's very private moment as well. You don't want many people in the room when you're giving a birth to a child, right? That's a very, very unique experience, and only the closest one needs to be in that room. And I feel that when I am in a room, when somebody is transitioning, that I'm in that inner circle. The trust that they have given me, the trust they have put in me, that is the highest level of honor that you can receive from that person. That's my experience, but that I'm not sure if you had.
And I would, speaking to that, I think it speaks to Jeffrey as a person, because I think you have this way about you that makes people feel very comfortable, and that you really care for the person. You really, there's a trust level there. And that's not something that, I think about myself, or if this was my family member, you don't just let a stranger stay in a room with your dying loved one. So the fact that these families trusted you and allowed you to do that, I think that speaks to you.
Thank you. And it's not something that I search for or tried to train myself to. Nothing like that. I think we're either born with a sense of empathy, and it doesn't make us any better or worse than any of the other children of God who are walking the planet. I mean, there are 8 billion of us. Who are we? But to be able to draw upon that particular side of our personalities, and I'll tell you honestly, I really I think a lot of that to my career and the training that I received, and where they would often do things like personality profiles, and where you anyway, those kinds of things occurred periodically throughout my career, and I learned that empathy was something that was part of my makeup, and I didn't even really know what it was. But it proved to be, I think, one of the most important links, to my hospice experiences, without intending it to be. It just played out that way, because I followed the lead, followed that nudge. Yeah.
Could you speak a little bit? So you had this experience inpatient, right? I think that many people think of this as hospice house, right? It's a hospice house, and I think some people think of this is what hospice is. And I'd love if you could share a little bit about the other side of it, right? This other end of the spectrum, caring for patients who are not in a hospice house, who are not in general inpatient, who are in just a regular nursing home or a home setting. What has that experience been like?
Well, that's a great question, because it is so much different. But as I told you earlier, before we started here, being able to do that was a gift in itself, because it gave me an understanding of end of life, and the journey that we take, all the things that take place before a person is 2 or 3 days away from that transition. But to be drawn into the lives of the people who have received hospice diagnoses was an amazing experience, because it gave me the opportunity to found or to forge or build a personal relationship with this person, and to be with them through that experience. I had the experience of knowing what awaited at the end, and it gave me a sense of understanding of what this person was moving toward, and to be able to know that what lies ahead, to be able to bring some measure of happiness and peace, or just whether it's an hour playing checkers, or whether it's whatever the case may be, but to be drawn a bit more deeply into the lives of these people, and to be able to be meaningfully present for them when and if their families cannot be. Well, I can be, and so I seize those opportunities, to forge a deeper connection, and it really meant a lot.
And I think that's one thing I want to emphasize is your experience volunteering over the last year and a half has really been, yes, we knew that these patients were going to die, right? We knew that they were going to pass away, but it was about every experience leading up to that too. And this could be a regular Thursday afternoon for Jeffrey, right? Visiting the patient and doing what you did. Can you share with us a little bit about what you did with these patients, just day to day, visit to visit? Because I think it would probably surprise some people.
Oh, I don't want to interrupt, but I want to kind of bring in. So we went from a hospice that is, perceived by majority of population, which is the GAP setting, which is like, oh, my doctor told my mom she needs hospice. She's going to be dead in a week, right? That's kind of what majority of people, when I talk to people on the phone, that's what they're, is my mom dying? Well, I don't know. I'll have to see her. But aren't we all dying, right? Yes. We just have a different time frame, and nobody really knows that time frame. So your first experience at the GAP was really active dying stages. So you have days to a tops of 2 weeks, maybe a few individuals lasted 2 weeks or so, but this active dying stages where you could clearly, as a nurse, I can see changes in certain organs, functions in the body, right? And so this is kind of what most people think of when they hear the word hospice. And we have transitioning now. I'm just letting the audience know, if whoever's listening to us, we're transitioning now to the life part of it. With Life Choice, we have it on our card, right? Life's moments made possible by Life Choice. And really what the focus is not on that, the last 2 weeks when the patient is transitioning, although that is very meaningful, important, and necessary. That journey takes a team approach, and it takes a village, as they say. But really to focus on life, right? That hospice doesn't only mean death, it means life as well. And there could be plenty of life. It's that the way the best explanation that we came up with is the last chapter of our book called Life, right? And so I know that you've had a gentleman you've visited that has now passed away, but you've been with him for some time. So, to your question, I think we were asking, can you describe that last chapter? What is that like? Is it any different? And I'll include a little bit more. We receive sometimes patients referrals from home health nurses, right? It's similar. They visit patients at home, but it's mostly physical therapy with the hopes of patient getting better, right? And so they sometimes call us, or the doctor calls us, and we receive that patient. We call the nurse, and say, hey, you have an opportunity, since sister company, whatever, to see this patient. Oh no, I don't want to see him anymore. And I said, what changed between yesterday when he was your patient on home health to a hospice tag on him today? Right. So I that's maybe the question you were asking, or maybe the question I want to ask before your question. What's different between a hospice patient and a non-hospice patient? Is that something that changes, and what's that like in the last chapter of life?
When I was being trained for my hospice position in Williamsburg, we went through a couple of weeks of fascinating training about end of life. Crossing the Creek was one of the books that we were encouraged to. Anyway, there are resources out there, that help me prepare for the experience, as well as the guidance from the trainers, who had been, who'd gone through the hospice care experience for a long time. But to be able to draw upon that experience and that training, and to enter into a relationship with a person who is on the surface of it looking healthy and alert and engaged and involved, but to be able to draw upon the importance of asking questions about that, asking meaningful questions of that person, getting to know that person a bit better, where so that you can create a sense of intimacy and trust.
Establishing rapport.
Yes, perfect, exactly. And to be able to do that, and as I learned more and more about that individual, or and the other people I'm with, it gave me an opportunity to understand how to make the time that we had together more meaningful. And so that was why, when I first met, he was quite alert and engaged, and it turned out that there were some puzzles in the gathering room, which we did together. And I could tell he was into it, so I would bring a couple of new puzzles every now and then, and that moved on. Once we moved beyond, once that became difficult for him, I learned somewhere along the line that he loved to play checkers. Oh, okay. So now, and so I was able to get a checkerboard and some checkers, and so we transitioned to that. Point is, it's just a matter of finding something meaningful and engaging, to do together, and that forged the relationship that we had, and it changed from just a kind of a introductory relationship, into a very deep and meaningful one, and be able to be there and offer him meaningful comfort and company, and yeah.
And I think what you did is you treated him as a person. You didn't treat him as a patient. It's just meeting with a person, and to treat him as more than a patient. Here I am.
Not a dying patient
not
either.
Not a dying
because
patient.
Because what is a dying patient? Any patient, right? It's just a matter of time again.
Right.
Yeah.
No, that's beautifully expressed. Well put. You're right. So it was.
Do you, by any chance, I keep interrupting you, but I'm just fascinated. Do you know how hospice care began? The story of a nurse out in England?
No.
So this was a gentleman who had AIDS at the time, and of course AIDS during that time was a terminal diagnosis.
Oh, okay.
So they moved him into the corner room, and they kept the door closed, and many people in the hospital wouldn't go there because that's a dying patient, right? Now we say hospice, terminal diagnosis. Back then it's like this person's dying. We don't want it. It's depressing. It's whatever the label they put on him. But there was this one nurse who would, go in and say, well, it's still a person, just, like he was yesterday before we found this diagnosis, and she engaged with him, and she spent time with him, and that turned into a deep and meaningful relationship. So she provided that end-of-life comfort and care for him. He turned out to be a pretty rich gentleman, and he left a whole bunch of money, and she went on to start hospice care on a volunteer basis. I'm not going to tell you the whole story, but she had doctors not wanting to prescribe certain medication to terminal patients, so she became a doctor, and that's how the hospice care started. But the point is, it started with her realizing we're all human, and this is still a person, and it's not so just exactly what you did, and I'm sure the training didn't prepare you to do that, didn't tell you to do that. This is our human thing, our empathy that nurse, your friend, saw years before.
I think you're right. It does circle back to that. You're right. And it's that connection that guided me. And it continues to guide me through the relationships. With the people that I'm seeing today, and so on. So you're exactly right. Yeah.
Have you learned anything from the people that you've had this meaningful connection? There are have terminal diagnosis, are in hospice. Have you used any of it to project on your life and draw some lessons?
Oh yes, absolutely. I don't want to overuse the word profound, but it's had a profound effect on my view of life, and I do not fear end of life. I really don't. To have been able to be part of that experience with so many other people. And to see that it is not the terrifying, frightening, awful experience that somehow we can convince ourselves it is, but in fact can be and should be a very peaceful transition, and and a very loving one. I don't know what lies ahead, when I die, but I do know that whatever it is, I will be there with the people that are meaningful in my life, whatever that is. No fear of death.
Yeah, I think fear might be the right word as well. My first experience with this was a lady, ALS lady, and she had 2 daughters in the room, and I just came there as a supervisor. I wasn't in hospice yet, introducing a new CNA to them. That's the company I worked for at that time. And, we ended up in a circle, and she ended up holding all of our hands and saying, it's okay. And I'm saying, well, here I am, 20-something-year-old, trying to say that this is wrong with my life, or this is wrong with my life. I need this to get better. I need that to get better. And the person and ALS is not a easy, disease to be dying from. But she is strong. She has a positive outview, and all my problems just kind of melted away. And I was driving home, not listening to loud music or anything that I did before, but really just be, profound. That's the word, experience. It just in my thoughts, thinking, overthinking my life, finding those those. So that affected me in dismantling many of my fears. Yeah.
I think these experiences make you feel, you're having a bad day, but you might be having a bad day before that, and then after this experience, it's like, what was I even?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. What even happened? What was I actually talking about? It's, I don't know. You feel very small in this massive space of whatever that is.
Yeah.
It's profound.
I guess I kind of embrace it as being just the natural flow of life. I mean, honest to gosh, I sincerely mean that. And to be able to settle into the flowing stream of loving goodness in life, whatever we want to call it, but that presence is there. And actually, now that I think of it, I think it was the hospice experience that really heightened my awareness and my conviction that exists. It is there for us, to tap into.
Right.
But to be able to settle, and one of the great things about the lessons I learned from hospice was as I walked into my hospice experience, I left at the door. Honest to gosh, it is time for me just to let go of that, to be present and loving and just and be present.
To serve, yeah.
Yeah.
Not to go there with an agenda.
Exactly. Yeah. None. You just absolutely leave it behind.
Right.
And step into that experience with that person, and it's not a conscious effort. It's not a conscious effort. To be able to devote myself fully to that person in that time, and to draw, from those experiences, how can I make this person's life, a bit lighter, as we, and in doing so, the gift is given back to me. I'm able to handle life, with a lighter heart, and whatever lies ahead with a lighter heart. I don't know, we get back what we give out or something. I don't know.
The karma, yes. That's I don't believe in many things, and I was definitely not a believer going into hospice, but I believe in something now.
Yeah,
I don't know what that is and how to describe it, but there is something that's higher than us. You've mentioned, I almost forgot this, but my mentor Gina that has showed me and explained the hospice philosophy to me. She was something I noticed. We were tagging along. I was following her to learn my nursing skills in the hospice setting, and she's a very strong lady, outspoken, a louder voice. But every time she would walk into a patient's home, she would change. And I said, "Are you playing?" She's like, "No. What do you mean? I'm different. I'm the same." But then I noticed it on myself, and that's perfectly described. Is whatever our problems, all of that stuff that stops at the door, and you walk into a different dimension.
Yes.
You walk into a home where time still stands still.
Yes.
Yeah, you feel it, and you're connected.
Yes.
And you're there. So that was very well. I haven't heard that, but yes, you leave your old self behind. And you're fully open and experiencing, and I think that's the only key. That's the only way to do it.
I think when when I think back to your notes, right, that I read, that you shared for your visits, you became a friend to this patient. Mm-hmm. There's no doubt. And you formed that friendship through going into those visits every single week without an agenda. You know, whatever was going to come up, you
Yes, true.
let that come out. And, you know, how you facilitated that, you know, whether it was, you know, wheeling this person outside on a nice day, playing checkers, bringing the chocolate ice cream, you know, that's your compassion. I mean, treating this person as a human, you know, more than getting his medications or more than getting his wound care done. That made all the difference because, you know, in some of these cases, there wasn't a lot of other visitors.
You know, I hadn't thought of it quite like that, but you're right. You know, but I just followed the direction of my heart. You know, that was all it was. Honest to gosh, you know, just it just felt like this was right.
This is the right thing to do.
Yeah, this, you know, do the next right thing or the next thing right, as they say, and you know, and that was what led me, you know, to those relationships and guided me through it. It was all I had to do was stop trying so hard. Just
that's a good way of putting it.
Try harder to not try so hard.
Really?
And just let it flow and embrace it and let it take us where it's intended to be taken. Because if I do that, the outcomes and consequences, you know, are so much more positive and loving and right. You know, not tainted by fear and anger or resentment. You know, yeah.
I have a provoking question, I think. It just came to mind, totally unprepared. But do you think it would be... I'll give you a background on why I came to that thought. Because many daughters and sons that I speak to, you know, and some of them ask me, oh, can you take your badge off and don't say that you're from hospice? Because we don't want to get my mom depressed, right? And she's, you know, she thinks she's getting all this treatment and everything else. And we talk in the room. And then I ask always, I want to be alone with the patient, to provide that privacy. And as soon as the daughters leave, she said, hey, can you know, I know I'm dying, you know, I have lung cancer, this. My daughter is trying to hide from me, but don't tell her I know. And so tell her that I'm okay. Don't tell her that I'm in pain. And what I cannot, you know, being a nurse is one thing, but I think all of the nurses become a little bit of social worker. We wear that hat sometimes. And I can't, like, the biggest challenge for me is you guys, and I always try to put them together in the same room and say, can you address that elephant? Because you are missing on such a deep, profound last chapter of your mom's life. You know, what kind of conversation you could be having with your mom while she still is alert and oriented to tell you the life review. This is the more important. I am doing this for that reason, for other people that I don't know. So you definitely don't want to miss it with your family. And that question is, would you think, I don't know, you know, about your family, would you think that would be a profound, what would be the message for you to those daughters and sons that might be in denial or?
I would say that loved one knows a whole lot more about what's going on than you think they do. You know, they're experiencing journeys, mental journeys, memory journeys, whatever, spiritual journeys, whatever they are, in ways that we can't even really begin to comprehend. You know, and that's one of the great, incredible experiences about being with that person as they approach end of life, is because with that gentle, soft connection, touch that we can share in that experience with them, and you know, and so I would just encourage the children, you know, if it's possible, to urge the children to not be afraid, you know, to be there for mom, you know, and to ask.
To ask the question, to allow them, I
think very often in hospice, we end up comforting the family as much, if not more, than the patient, because the patient is
so true.
Many times, not always, but many times come to terms with this is happening.
Yeah.
Right.
Yes.
You know, I had a sense of something that was
Well
happening before. Now, okay, now I got a diagnosis or whatever it is. And the family is, they were aware or they weren't aware or they were in denial, whatever that is. Now they're
want
trying to
fight.
come to terms with
Yeah.
it. Well, how could you, we can do something, but I'm tired. I had a case like that. The patient, the daughter walks out of the room. The patient's like, I'm really tired.
Yeah.
The daughter comes back in. Mom, you've got to do the smoothie and you've got to do the juices. And she's, the daughter's telling the patient is telling her daughter, okay, I've done that. Maybe my test results were a little bit better, but I got no more joy out of my life at that time. I'm tired. Yeah. And that can be very hard for families to hear.
I can share a
Really well put.
Yeah, a quick story. This is prior to nursing school and prior to my grandma's story, which made me go into hospice. But I was a caregiver with this 92-year-old, really, really amazing gentleman. He was a veteran as well, fascinating stories. And we watched Bonanza together. Probably know way too many episodes of that. But so twice a week, he had physical therapy. He had, CHF, congestive heart failure. He had some lung issues and other stuff. I would say healthy for a 92-year-old, somewhat. But those 2 days that he had physical therapy, he was exhausted the rest of the day. He could not watch his episode of Bonanza. He was just, sitting there, like either falling asleep in a chair and drooling, or, I would put him in the bed after physical therapy because I've noticed that, and I didn't want him to be in such... I just don't think it's the right setting. You want to take a nap, it's okay to be in bed, but he doesn't look right, sitting in a chair just hunched over. Which his daughter, didn't like that he's in bed. But to me, sitting there, I was 19 at the time, just thinking like, this is not right. Something's off here. What are we, and I was asking the physical therapist questions, like, what is the goal here? Mm-hmm. Is he all of a sudden gonna, today he did 20 steps and, last week he only did 18. Great. How is that going to change his life now, these 2 steps? But it's taking away at least 2 days of his life a week because he's exhausted after those training. Yeah. So that was just something I wanted to share, like some of the pushing of the of the loved ones and families, and sometimes we have to turn off that the medical in us, in the daughters and sons, right? And that's very difficult. It's probably going to be for me as well when it comes, to my grandparents and the parents. But one thing I tell them is, we are here as hospice. What is hospice? We're going to do all the skilled stuff so you get to be the daughter again.
Right.
You don't have to worry about wound care, medications, durable medical equipment, all the setup and everything else. So, yeah.
Yeah, asking the loved one how they feel about things can mean so much to that loved one.
Yeah.
Seriously, I've come across situations where the patient, the loved one wishes that the other loved ones understood more clearly, how I feel and what I want, and there is no difficulty or nothing wrong with asking that loved one how they feel about things, and responding to it. We're all in this together. The loved one needs to know that we're on this journey together. We're walking this road together, and and they find such comfort knowing that the people around them understand, are with them.
On the other end of the spectrum with that, I mean, if there's not that dialogue, if there's not that conversation, the patient could end up feeling isolated.
Oh, sure.
I'm already going through this experience that physically no one in my family is going through. But when I try to share that with them, it's no, it's okay. It's okay. We're going to get through this. It's going to be better. You're cutting that off, Very often it's because the family's not ready to hear that. They're not ready to have that discussion.
And not after conversation, it's time for hospice. We do have patients, on the other hand, which call us, is like, hey, is my mom ready? And mom knows about it, so she wants to be in hospice. It's a great benefit and it covers a lot. But we say no, it's not time yet, and that's okay as well.
Right.
But to your point is listening to what they're saying, because they, a lot of times the physical therapy will help and they will get through it, knee replacement, hip replacement, whatever it is. But it's always a good idea, I think, is what Jeffrey's saying as well, to just listen, right? When your loved one, your daughter, just share that experience and have them tell you how they feel.
And when someone is sharing these things with you, it's not, very often they're not sharing these things with you to have you make it better. They are sharing these things with you to be heard, to put it out there.
I need to hear it more. My wife keeps telling me that same thing.
to just put it out there. They want it to be heard. It's on their mind. It's a weight that they feel, and don't fix it. You can't fix it. So
be present.
Don't try. Exactly.
And listening is so important. It was not one of my strengths early in my life, and my beloved companion and life partner Colleen would often remind me, about that. But I learned from those lessons. I really did, and again, also much of my professional training had to do with listening skills and active listening and asking the right questions and so on. And all these things came together, with the hospice experience, and I was able to use that growing self-awareness, to.
I have a personal question to you outside of hospice. When we were waiting to do this podcast, you were sharing that you've changed, 15 locations, right, throughout your career, and some in Europe and Philippines, and you did that with your wife, right? And you travel quite often, so there was not as deep of relationship with friends outside. So your wife is your best friend.
Oh yes.
And I think that's the strongest relationship. Loving someone is one thing, but liking the person you love as well, that's different. So maybe some key, how do we do that? How do other people, what are the lessons, how to be best friend with your loved one?
I'm probably going to speak a bit outside of the hospice.
Feel free.
Conversation.
That's serving my needs. I like to know that.
I don't know what the heck it is that has kept Colleen and I, whether it's the shared experiences we've had over the years, but I reflect on every single morning of my day. I begin with a prayer and meditative time. I'm not a Christian, but I'm a very deep believer in God and in that whatever they choose to call that presence. But she and I have shared experiences unlike any other person I've ever known in my life, unlike anything else. I don't know. There was just a natural sense of this is where we belong together.
Difficult, but also I think is the only way to have such deep and meaningful relationship is to be best friend. And what I notice is that if I and my wife don't talk very openly and deeply about stuff, and sometimes topics that we don't really want to discuss about, right? That we have to still go there and have to care for each other, make each other better. And talk. I think I found so far it's been helpful. Sorry, I didn't mean to get off topic about the volunteering, but just it was an incredible story, and you don't hear that a lot. And I feel that as community, as society, we need to bring those questions up because the divorce rates are really high. The relationships are not as great, and there is something that we're missing in a philosophy of how to be with one another. And I think that translates into hospice as well somehow, right? It's human.
I think it does too, because she is my perfect life companion and life partner. How I stumbled into that relationship, I have no idea. We had our share of difficulties over over our lives, but that remained steady and strong and nobody else in my life, could understand me the way she does. A lot of it has to do with being able to not get so wrapped up in myself, to realize that there's a lot more going on out there in the world than Jeff, you know, and I'm not the center of attention in the world. You know,
Well, I think
not
you spoke
revolving
to
around
that
me.
also with your experience on what you do with patients.
Uh-huh.
So it's almost your ability to maybe take a step back and see the bigger picture.
Pay attention, read the room. Yeah.
Yes, and yes, that is absolutely the truth, and I could really drift off, you know, into a side story if you wanted, but it wouldn't have anything necessarily to do.
If it's coming up, I think you should share.
You should share it.
All
Yeah.
right, all right. Well,
Let's
here
do
we
this.
I suffered from alcoholism early in my life, in my career with Marriott, and I just, you know, the whole world of fine dining and all those kinds of things and all the stress and transition of all that stuff. I've been sober a number of years now. And my first service work began as a member of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I have been deeply, deeply engaged in AA and have been sober since the day that I confronted my alcoholism. And there was and here's where it's going to get kind of goofy. The people who have been able to transcend their alcoholism have some sort of a spiritual awakening. It was not a deep, profound event. It was not, you know, anything like that. But I know the day and the time when I finally surrendered my self-will, my selfish, self-absorbed self, and was able to let go of that somehow or other and just release and turn my alcoholism. It's hard to put those into words, but it is almost like a spiritual awakening. And from that point forward, it was a couple of few years after that I got drawn into hospice. It began with Alcoholics Anonymous and recognizing my self-centeredness and my selfish, self-absorbed way of living and thinking. And I also did 5 years of group therapy while I was wrestling with my alcoholism before I found my way into AA. All of these self-awareness things combined took me to the place where I was able to step away from my alcoholism. I was able to focus on what really mattered, Colleen, my loving family. And I was given a second chance at life.
You put in the work.
And what's that?
You put in the work too.
Well, it was a rough go, but I was given the second chance. And all my questions about what does life mean, you know, what is my purpose in life, all these questions suddenly became answered. I didn't ask to be born. I didn't ask to be brought here. You know, I didn't ask to be an alcoholic, you know, as I was growing up. But I was given the gift of self-awareness and to understand this, you know, and now what do I do with it? Okay. Now, I'm not doing it because I don't want God to be mad at me, or I'm not trying to earn a place, you know, through the pearly gate. No. The outcomes and consequences and gifts and blessings that fill my life, if I let go of myself, you know, and I'm able to be of some meaningful service to somebody else, my hospice people, my fellow alcoholics who are struggling with their, you know, it's all about that, and it is that gives me the sense of fulfillment. Yeah, you know, and fulfillment isn't even the right word, but that is what, you know, guides me into a more meaningful life, a more well-spent life. So I
think you're speaking really to your journey.
See, that's the thing, and I didn't mean to.
No, it makes more sense now, because one thing, you know, Alex was asking me before we sat down today is, you know, everyone who is in hospice, whether it's a volunteer or someone who stays in hospice, right, in this work that we do, there's some sort of journey.
Yes.
And, you know, I think you've shared previously, before this conversation today, you shared bits and pieces, but you have really taken charge of, okay, someone told me this, and now I start to see your journey. You know, this nurse told me this, but before that, this happened, and this happened, and this happened. Because of that, it's like you're ever evolving, and I mean, I've heard you share how it's changed you.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yeah, it absolutely transformed me. Mm-hmm. It really did, and gave me a sense of rightness and purpose that had never been there before. And and that's what maintains me. And I'll dip back into the hospice experience, because I will tell you that going into in Waukegan to take care of every week was a very disheartening and depressing experience, as I looked at what faced every single day of his life, and the people that I got to know there, and the level of care that the people receive, and so on. And again, this is off record, but I wanted to share that with you. I hadn't intended to do that here in this conversation, but it is the conviction that spending time on Thursday afternoons was the most right thing I could humanly do. It gave me the strength to, I've got to go back and confront all the people I've come to know now who are dying, and I got to know so many other people there, because I would go there once a week, for a year and a half, and I saw what they were suffering from, and were being ignored and brokenhearted and frightened and delusional and so on, And one side of me says, I can't do this again. I can't. But all I had to do was stop and remember, wait a minute, son, back the truck up here. No, this is, it is being able to share the gift that I was given with someone else, to be able to.
And that made, I'm sure, is weak. When you stop by and play checkers. And,
exactly. Yeah. That's how it all came to together, and so like I say, it helps me to recognize my my self-centeredness, when it starts to reemerge, and helps remind me about where to devote my time and my thought and my, and I don't know.
Okay.
This is a very intense conversation. I've never had a conversation like this with anybody. I mean, not in that detail, but my family and the details of my life, but to try to dig in and talk about these kinds of things in a setting like this is incredible. I've never had a conversation like this.
The hospice people are intense. And we also, once you get to know us, that's one thing that I notice. Everybody has dark humor a little bit, but, we got to joke about stuff inside. And it's not, laughing at people or anything, but it's how we deal with stuff. But I think all of us are on a journey of getting to know ourselves and getting to know our fellow humans, and that's why these deep conversations happen. I mean, I could be walking around to the bathroom and stop by and talk to Kat, and we have this deep conversation. I don't know, but I don't think it happens in every office when you're just going somewhere to have a deep conversation. But then again, we have to remember that it's all about the life's moments. Yeah. It's really not, how long do I have, doctor? Oh, you have a year, you have 2 years, you have 20 years. Is what do you do with those years? And you mentioned, you had the old you, right?
Yes.
Which worked, made money and expanded your career, traveled, but perhaps you did not enjoy that many moments. And since new you, more moments are being enjoyed. So it's not really about the time, it's about the moments, it's about the deepness.
Boy, did you put it right.
Yeah. And if you don't go deep, you don't live as good of moments.
Yeah. And I'm so grateful to have been given the second chance, to as painful as self-awareness can be. I wouldn't trade this for anything. I'd go spending an hour when I drove home from Waukegan after visiting Dwayne, I felt it was so right.
Yeah.
It was right. That was the right thing.
Pushing past maybe some of that initial, all right, I'm going to go. Here we go. But after, wow, almost, I've had those experiences leaving patients' homes too. Yes. And I felt like this clearing of my mind. Just every single stressor or thing that I was worrying about or thinking about from the day before, the week prior, it just fell off.
You were and that's the biggest difference between the hospice house experience in Williamsburg and the hospice experience here, because in Williamsburg, I was able to hold on to, I mean, I to be able to walk into into a serene environment, leave myself at the door, and I meant sincerely everything I said about that, because that was exactly what it was like. Going to spend time with was different, and there were many occasions when I pulled up in front of the pavilion, turned my car, it was time to go, and I would sit there in my car and just reach out to my higher power. Help me to let go of myself here. Just let go. Just let go. Just go with the flow. Just be loving and present for this man. Mm-hmm. That is all. And I would need that. And that, because I still, because going into a hospice environment situation or a patient situation outside of that serene, is much different.
Yeah.
But is every bit as powerful.
Mm-hmm.
I also have some of the selfish points, I think. I don't know. But I do believe in karma in one way or another. In as I drive away from those, difficult visits, and I'm thinking, and many my friends, including my wife, doesn't know what some of them are like and what I need to do there. But it feels right, and I'm going to do that moment. It's not below me. Nothing is there. And if I hear that anybody at our company says that it's, I need to call the CNA because I'm not going to change a soiled patient or something like that. But as I drive away from that, like the selfish thought that I have is that I hope, these karma points will come back and if I'm in this same setting, that there will be another person having the same thought, that I earned some points there, that they'll, I will be sent a person with compassion, and they will do that for me as well. And it just feels great you feel good about yourself. Mm-hmm. This is something that other people don't see. This is something that other people don't know about, but you do, and it's with you, and it's the highest gift you can get.
And it is doing it without any expectation of anything, any record. No. Yes. That in fact would taint it. Mm-hmm. Just the psychiatrist that led my group therapy for those years often said, we get the consequences we deserve. They can be good, loving, positive consequences, or they can be otherwise. But we will get the consequences. We get the consequences we deserve, and that is one of the great motivators, I guess, to just try to stay on the path, because I don't have to worry about the future. If I just,
doing the right thing.
Doing the right thing,
the next right thing or the next thing right. I don't have to worry about the outcomes. Mm-hmm. They take care of themselves.
Right.
Who do you think from people out there in the community, who do you think can benefit by becoming a volunteer and doing this kind of work, at least every once in a while, once a month, once a week, whatever that can be?
I think it's the person who hears this podcast and thinks, something touched me here, and the seed was planted. Whether I heard the right thing from the right person, at the right time, and I followed that intuitive guidance that
take it as a sign and do the step.
Follow it. Yeah. Follow the lead. Yeah.
And I think, it's not going to be for every single person. Perhaps there will be people who give it a try and step back. Sometimes people are too emotional. Maybe it's too tough, whatever the case be. But your suggestion is give it a try. If there is a thought, follow it. Yeah. And if it's not the right thing, at least you did it. One lesson learned that guides me through life from my patients was that, and I noticed that in the good settings, but also in the bad, they never regret the things they did. They always regret the things they didn't do. I wish I said I'm sorry. I wished I finished this school. Mm-hmm. I wished I opened this company, because I really, I wished I left this job and went, to whatever the case might be. It's always they regret the things they didn't do. So this is a solid advice. I think you're deep into that hospice philosophy of, if it's in your head, if you're thinking about it, give it a try. If it's not yours, something else will come along. Yeah. I was driving here and I was asking myself a question. on, how do you explain? Because I get a question, what is hospice and when is the right time? And,
Okay.
And I'm trying to it's hard to explain until
Yeah,
you
'cause
really
I
know it.
don't get
And
those
you've been a
questions.
volunteer for hospice in different settings
Mm-hmm.
now, but I think you still don't know all the aspects of hospice and what
True.
it provides. And
True.
and almost none of our patients fully experience all the aspects because some need this and other needs that, and we kind of cater to them on an informational visit. We cannot tell them everything that hospice covers because
Right.
it just becomes, then we'll sit there for 4 hours and they will not need most of it, right? So I want to read something that I came up with and with the help of ChatGPT, full disclosure. But but tell me if this is something that you would agree with. So think of hospice like calling a guide for a challenging hike. Imagine you're climbing a mountain and the path becomes harder to navigate as you go. You wouldn't wait until you're completely lost or exhausted to seek help. Instead, you would bring an experienced guide early, someone who knows the terrain, can ease your burden, and help make the most out of your journey. Hospice is that guide for the end-of-life journey. Calling earlier allows you to provide support, comfort, and directions when it's most needed. Allows us. I want to say, is that a good explanation of
It is.
Get a guide before going into an unknown journey?
Because what you're saying is spot on, but I think people who are dealing with a loved one who is dying maybe don't want to be told what to do, or I don't know.
I usually, when people call the office and they say, I need this. And I think to myself sometimes, I don't know if that's exactly what you need, but can you tell me a little bit about what's been going on? And then they start into the story and I'm following the, the track of, what's happened. What I'm looking for is that narrative and how do they talk about this and what have they tried? What have they not tried? What could make that easier? I might be thinking to myself, and I might ask them a few questions along the way. And through that, I'm thinking, is hospice going to be a good fit? Could it be helpful? Could it not be helpful? And based on what they share with me, I can give them responses, right? And talk about the different ways in which we could help.
Right. Individual approach, yeah.
And maybe some people are not there yet. Maybe some people are truly not ready for hospice, physically or even mentally, right? Maybe their goal doesn't quite align with what we can provide. But regardless of where someone is along this journey, one thing that I think could always be helpful is that goals of care conversation. What do you want to happen? What do you not want to happen? How can you make that a reality? Have you thought about that? Because if you don't have a plan in place, to your point, these are just words.
Yeah, and I'll take your feedback. I think you're right on the spot, and perhaps we roll it back into saying of, if you had a thought that it's the last chapter, right, for you or your family, call and ask, right? That's the right time to start gathering data. It's better too early, not too late. So that's kind of, I think we kind of stay on that, feeling, right? Just like if you feel a volunteer, if you ever had a thought of volunteering in such settings, do follow up and give it a try. And perhaps it's not the best fit, you'll find out. So the same thing with this. I think it's softer to say than, hey, here's how we describe it, because every person is different, and this might resonate with some but not with others. So thank you. I know that was outside of your scope as a volunteer, but I just have to make it difficult for you.
No. This is, wow. What a conversation this has been.
Yeah.
Well,
I think
right?
we talked out. So thank you again,
Thank
Jeffrey.
you.
For
No, thank
spending
you.
the
so
time.
much.
Oh my gosh.
You are a gem.
Yes.
Oh no, likewise. I mean, the connection that we have now is beyond words. I couldn't expect. I didn't know what to expect out of this, but this is quite an incredible experience. I'll never forget it.